So this is just a very simple flourish. I've actually been thinking about this move for quite some time now, but never really bothered with posting anything about it, mainly because it's always been sort of a curiosity more than anything else. But I did reflect on this move just a bit more, and I think it does give an interesting visual for magic as well, which is why I'm like, okay, maybe I can actually do something with this. So it is just an idea, so is it worth anything? Who knows, right? That's for you to decide. So honestly, yeah, ideas are ideas, and where you take them is up to you. So yeah. So the first known publication of this move, interestingly enough, comes from The Art of Magic back in 1909 by Thomas Nelson Downes. There the move is known as the Flower of Cards. But of course, this move doesn't come from Thomas Nelson Downes. It actually comes from a yogi by the name of I actually can't pronounce this, so I'm actually just gonna put his name up there, just so that I don't butcher any names. But this yogi actually comes from Calcutta, in India, which is now known as Kolkata. So yeah, it's a very interesting origin, but we don't really have any sort of dates as to when this move was created or when Thomas Nelson Downes has heard of this move. So as far as we know, 1909 is the earliest starting point for this move. The second known publication of this move actually comes from Tricks of the Masters back in 1942 by Will Goldston. There we go. I accidentally mixed up his names, but it's Will Goldston. Suspiciously enough, the move in this book is also called the Flower of Cards, which leads me to sort of believe that Will Goldston probably just saw this move from The Art of Magic and is like, yoink, it's part of my book now. So I imagine that's where this move actually comes from in that publication. The thing is, both moves are actually kind of described differently. So in The Art of Magic, the move is described as, quote, "You simply hold the pack between the finger and the thumb of the right hand, give the hand a gentle shake, and the cards at once assume the shape of a spiked-shaped fan," unquote. There's actually one main point of confusion with this sort of description, because it says, hold the pack between the finger and thumb. That's singular, it's not fingers, it's finger. But later on in the description actually tells you with the fingers and thumb. So could it be a typo? Maybe, who knows? Or they could just be not very specific with the description of the move, so it's kind of hard to tell. But in the book, there's not really any image as well. So we kind of have to make some guesswork here and there for the description of the move. And it's overall quite bizarre. But in Tricks of the Masters, the move is described as, quote, "Press the cards tightly with the fingers and the lower part of the hand," unquote. So the two descriptions do share similarities, but there are also minor differences. Jeff McBride also shares this move. He shares it in The Art of Card Manipulation, Volume 1, but he actually calls this move Goldston's Card Flower. But now we know that it actually predates Will Goldston. But as far as we know, those are the two main sources for this move. But of course, we now know to associate it with the yogi, whose name is up there somewhere. So yeah, that's the general history behind this move. So for this move, you really only need to know one move, and that is the Ferris Shuffle, which is just this fancy little shuffle over here. Right? Granted, you don't necessarily need the Ferris Shuffle to make this move work, but it does make setting up the move a lot easier and faster. The second thing that you need is that, well, you need a rather beat up deck, because believe me, you don't want to use any of your new decks for this one, because it will actually wreck your newer decks, and so it's also a lot harder to actually get the move to be set up properly, so you really want a beat up poop deck, which is extremely soft, okay? So those are the two prerequisites I need. A Ferris Shuffle and basically just a beat up deck, okay? So to start off, you're going to split the deck in half, so 26 and 26. If you know the Ferris Shuffle, then that's fine. But again, if you don't, then you could just count the cards out individually. That's completely fine as well. It just makes the setup a bit longer, but it's really no issue, right? Because it's more of a flourish and not a magic effect, so you can just split it up, right? if you do know how to do a Pharaoh shuffle, then you should know how to do a Pharaoh check, or you should know instinctively how to split the deck already in half. So this should be correct. But even if you don't split the deck completely, like fully, perfectly in half, it's completely fine. It still works properly. It's just, it wouldn't look as nice. But having an incomplete, or having like having one packet have one more or two more cards doesn't necessarily make the move look worse. So it's fine, but 26 by 26 is going to be good, okay? Now what you're going to do is that you're going to take both packets and you're going to grip both, right? In a bill grip, okay? So one packet's back is going to be facing outwards and one is going to be facing inwards, like so. And what you're going to do now is that you're going to apply some downwards pressure with your index finger, right? Both of them at the same time, while your other fingers, so your middle ring and pinky finger and your thumb, are actually just going to bend the packet upwards, like so. So this creates some pressure upwards while your index finger is pushing it downwards. At some point, you can release your index finger and just bend these cards like so, okay? So you're just gonna bend these cards just like so. Now, just bend them until you can't bend them anymore, okay? Because look, they're packets, they're decks of cards of 26 and 26. It's going to be very, very, very difficult for you to actually crease your cards like so, right? You will only crease cards if you fold them, in which case you are not folding cards, right? So you're just bending them, so don't worry about creasing your cards. At some point you'll feel like you'll be unable to bend the packet anymore. That's the point at which you stop, okay? But if you are scared of creasing your cards, take it a bit easier on the bending process, right? But generally, I've never really had an incident where I crease my cards doing this, okay? But now you have this, which is two packets in the same orientation, but bent in different directions, like so. So now if you place both packets back together, you have this little thing, which is sort of like the Under Armour logo, right? So now you're going to take one half of the deck, and now you have the other half, and you're basically just going to Pharaoh both packets together, okay? So this deck is modern cut, so I just need to Pharaoh bottom to top, like so, right? And it doesn't even have to be a perfect Pharaoh. Preferably it has to be a perfect Pharaoh, but it's all right, really, the only part that needs to be perfect is actually the center, right? The center of the Pharaoh shuffle needs to be, well, more or less perfect. If you have some stragglers at the top or bottom, then it's completely fine, okay? But generally the top and the bottom are where you get the most amount of leeway, okay? But center, perfect, like so. And now what you're going to do is you're just going to push both packets together. These two cards are in complete, are bent completely differently, right? So you're just going to push these two packets together, like so. And now what you have is actually a deck that has cards in alternating bends. You have one card over here that's bent in a U shape, in a upside down U shape, and then you have one card that's bent in a U shape. And if you actually let go of the deck, you'll notice that actually just springs free, like so. This is the effect that you want. This is the bizarre effect that you want, okay? Now, if you can't do the Pharaoh shuffle, that's completely fine, right? You have both packets are bent. You could just alternate, right? Just placing them back together, right? So you take one that's bent in one direction, place it down, take one that's bent in the other direction, place it down, and you basically just put the deck back together in alternating pairs, and you will get the same effect as well. That's actually what the Art of Magic recommends, but it does take a bit of time, so that's why preferably you should learn the Pharaoh shuffle, okay? Now once you have this, the deck in basically alternating pairs of different bends, what you're going to do is that you're just going to take the deck, right, and you're going to place it upright in the palm of your hand. You're just going to place it upright in the palm of your hand, and your fingers are just going to clamp down on the deck as though you're holding a hamburger. So my pinky ring, middle, and index finger are clamping down on the backs. My thumb is clamping down on the faces, okay? And now what you're going to do is that you're actually just going to slowly open up your hands. And what actually happens is that these cards, because they are all sort of bouncing off of one another, they're just going to sort of become a slinky, right? And now you can just slowly open it up, and naturally these cards will want to fan out like so, okay? But again, you want to open your hand sort of slowly and steadily, and this allows the cards to actually just open up like so, okay? There's actually sort of a sweet point that's sort of dependent on how tipped your hand is, because if you actually notice, if I actually tip my hand over more to one side, these cards will actually start falling to that one side, okay? So there's sort of a sweet spot for that. And also, it also depends on how much my fingers are opened, right? At some point, if I open my hands too much, the center will just collapse, okay? So there's sort of a sweet spot between how much your hand is tipped and how much your hand is opened, right? And you just need to find that sweet spot. Ideally, according to the tricks of the masters, your hand should be able to open up completely flat, okay? But if you want this effect to be a bit more pronounced, you have to bend the cards a bit more, okay? So if you actually take a look at it from the side, you can actually see these cards are actually alternating bends. Okay, wait, I'll do this. Right, you actually see that these cards are actually alternatingly bent, just like so. But again, if you want to have a bigger sort of flower, right, without it collapsing, you have to just bend the heck out of the packet, okay? And that's for the general handling of the flower of cards. This is how it will generally look like. It just opens up like so, okay? Now, to clean up, it's just extremely simple. You just square up the deck like so, and you just give the deck just a waterfall, just a squeeze in the same direction. And then because the deck is pooped, everything is now back to normal, right? With no sign of any of the sort of abuse that you put this deck through. So yeah, that's generally how you do the first handling of the flower of cards. Now here's just an alternate handling for this move. So you're basically just gonna have the exact same setup as the original one. You're just gonna bend the heck out of your packets, and you're just gonna pharaoh them together, just like so. There's a couple of mistakes here and there, so I'll just redo my pharaoh. It's a bit more difficult because these cards are abused. It's fine. It's fine if I have a couple of mistakes here and there. If there is, then you can just correct them and then just sort your packet out. It's really no problem. Because again, this is a flourish rather than a magic effect, so it should be fine. Sorry, give me a second. There we go. So if you go into the same setup for the move, you can actually go into an alternate handling. So if you have your deck squared up, you can actually grab the deck by the long edges, just like so, close to the bottom corners with your middle finger and your thumb, just like so. And now what you can do is that you can actually just slowly loosen your grip, and you're going to release pressure with your middle and your thumb. And this actually causes the cards, because they're bent and they're fighting against each other, this actually causes the cards to actually push against one another, and the cards will naturally just sort of open on its own, right? the deck will bloom sort of on its own. Sort of similar to Zach Mueller's Bloom, but this move does predate Bloom, okay? And so now you have a deck that just sort of automatically opens up, just like so, okay? So that is just an alternate handling for this move, right? And you're gonna have to, because the long edges is gripped around the middle finger and your thumb, you might have to shift around your middle finger and your thumb to sort of adjust for which side is getting more of the pressure, right? So if I'm slowly opening up my middle finger, my thumb and my middle finger, right? I can tell that right now I'm releasing too much on this side, so now I want to release more on the left side. So I really want, it's sort of hard to describe. It's basically just have to feel out, right? You basically just have to feel out the pressure, slowly release everything, and slowly get a feel for how deck is slowly splitting apart like so, right? And you'll actually feel it, right? You'll feel which side, right, is actually coming apart more, which allows you to sort of apply more pressure on that side and release the other side. So then you have an equal split, right? Because you don't want one side to be falling apart while the other sort of stays intact, right? So it's really something that you have to feel out and try for yourself. And that is the alternate handling to the flower of cards. And again, if you want to clean up, just close the deck, give it just a simple waterfall, and there we go. You have the deck back in peak condition. Now this move is primarily a flourish, but I've been thinking about the setup position a lot. And by setup position, I mean this one, right? I'm not gonna do like a perfect pharaoh, doesn't really matter for this instance, especially not for Magic, right? I've been thinking about the setup position a lot, because if I actually have the setup position, look how bulbous, right? Look how, I don't know why I said bulbous, look how the deck bulbs, and it looks unstable, right? It looks like it's falling apart. But that's very, very interestingly visually interesting, right? Because if you think about it, right, if you do a triumph where you have a bluff like face up, face down shuffle, right? The moment the deck is squared up, you sort of lose track of the state of the deck, right? You have maybe a cover card, like a face up card, and then you have like a face down card here, right? You sort of have that, but it's hard for you to keep track of the state of the deck, even though you have that sort of visual on top. But imagine this, right? You have this visual now. You have this visual where the deck is clearly not in its correct state and looks like it's unstable, like so, right? It looks like it's just, it's fighting against itself, which should be what a triumph should give the impression of, because you're shuffling face up cards into face down cards, right? It's not natural for the deck to be in this condition, right? So I think having this sort of unstable, sort of wobbly look could be a good indicator for cards being shuffled face up into face down, because a normal deck would not do this, right? A normal deck would not have all these gaps and does not look like it's about to fall apart, right? So I think having this setup for an indicator that the deck is shuffled face up into face down is quite interesting, because now the deck can be squared up and can still indicate that it's face up and face down. You don't have to spread through the deck or do whatever. Now you have this visual where you can show the edges and you're like, look, this is a messed up deck of cards, right? Like it's shuffled face up and face down. So it's really interesting. And this sort of unstable look, I think, can also be applied to things like oil and water, where you have a presentation where it's like because you're mixing oil with water, things are unstable and tend to and wants to separate, right? If you actually want to do it with a packet, you can, right? If you have like a, sorry, I'll just do like a quick demonstration, right? If you have something that's okay, this is gonna be so we have this, right? So if we mix in red cards with black cards, right? If we mix in like this, you can see how unstable the packet looks, right? You can see how unstable the cards are because they don't want to be mixed, right? Now suddenly you have a very, very interesting visual when the packets are squared up, because usually when we want to indicate that something is off, you have to turn the deck face up and you have to spread through it, right? But now the audience can keep track of the unstable state even though everything is squared up, which I think is a very, very interesting sort of prospect, right? So yeah, and if you want to do like a restoration for the Triumph, right? If you want to do a restoration for a Triumph while the deck is still unstable, what you can do is that you can actually just hold the deck out and just let the audience members see the cards just sort of flow, right? Just sort of flow into it. So you can sort of do a dribble visual, right? So you can see like, oh, the deck is so unstable, but if I snap my fingers, watch, everything just goes back to order, right? Everything just goes back to order. Something along those lines, right? Like, oh, look, now everything is back face down except for your card. And then they can have their card sort of here, right? So here, you can sort of use the natural properties of the slinkiness of the deck to sort of reveal that everything is back to normal. And then you can just clean everything up, right? So I think that's a very, very interesting idea for just making use of the wobbliness of the setup for Magic, right? Just this unstable look for the deck. But again, it's just an idea, and whether you choose to actually use it or to explore it, well, that's entirely up to you. But again, it's just sort of a very, very interesting visual that I think can benefit some people. So since this is more of a Flourish video than a Magic video, there wasn't really a way for me to put a further reading section for this move. So yeah, we're just gonna skip directly to the final thoughts. So this was a very, very simple Flourish. Nothing too difficult, but I have been sitting on it for quite a bit, mainly because of the Magic idea, mainly because of the unstable deck visual Magic idea that I got from the setup. And so yeah, I just thought that it would be interesting to put this video out, mainly because of that new idea. But again, it just comes to show that, like, sort of exploring different ideas, right, doesn't necessarily have to come solely from Magic, right? Because again, this move is from a Flourish, but you can, I've seen many magicians actually take other things that aren't flourishes, that are away from cards, to inspire their Magic, right? Garrett Thomas took lessons on miming for his Magic. Joshua J is a theater kid, right? Acting, right? Movies, all that stuff. Those he implemented into scripting of Magic, right? So inspiration for not just mechanics, but also how you perform Magic, for how you interact with the audience members, can come from a huge variety of sources. You don't only have to look at Magic to become better or to gain creativity at Magic, right? Other sources are entirely plausible and are actually encouraged because, well, if we actually stay in the same circle of Magic for our entire careers, you're just sort of stuck in the circle. But if you reach out and sort of find inspiration elsewhere, I think you can actually find a huge myriad of ideas out there. They're just waiting to be implemented into Magic, right? So I don't know how I got into this spiel just from talking about a Flourish, but it is pretty interesting, right? But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for the Flower of Cards. Hope you enjoyed the Flourish, and hope you enjoyed just the bonus Magic idea over there with the unstable sort of wobbly deck. But yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you guys next time.